Hello! Today's video I'm going to be answering all questions relating to pumping milk. This video is for anybody who is new to pumping and is not sure or knows a little bit about it but has questions. So I've just written a list of questions that I could think of. I have been exclusively pumping now for 8 months, so I feel like I've got quite a good experience with it all. I am not a professional, so obviously take a midwife's advice or a health visitor's advice over mine. This is just from my personal experience, but I will do my best to answer from my opinion. So if you're not sure, exclusively pumping is where you don't breastfeed, you don't formula feed. It is purely you are pumping your breast milk every day for your baby. So whatever reason that may be, for me personally, my nipples are not cut out for breastfeeding. They're so flat, there's nothing there for the baby to latch onto. So that's why I have personally decided to do this. So you should start to pump as soon as your baby is born. My midwife actually advised that I do it slightly before just to get a bit of colostrum, but I don't think you should properly pump with a machine before. My midwife told me just to hand express. My colostrum came in quite early on, so I could get little bits here and there, but certainly once the baby is born you want to be starting as soon as you are able to do. So for example, my son was born at 7:30 in the morning. We were home by midday. I didn't take my pump to hospital with me. I would say if you have to stay in hospital, they do have pumps in hospital that you can use, so just ask, but I already had one at home. So as soon as I got home I started pumping from that point. So this varies depending on what stage you're at. So for example, like I say, at the start when my baby was first born, you want to be doing it fairly regularly. So basically the more you pump, the more milk you're going to end up getting, because your body thinks it's in high demand from the baby. So at the start, certainly for the first month or so, I would say I did it every 2 to 3 hours, and that really builds up a really good supply as well in the fridge and in the freezer. Then I sort of after a month maybe change it to 3 to 4 hours, and now my son is 8 months old. I express 6 o'clock in the morning, around lunchtime, so 12 o'clock, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then just before I go to bed maybe about 10, and then I don't do it in the night time anymore. So I'm only doing it 4 times a day now, and that's fine, that's working for me. I would say you've obviously got to think about mastitis and things like that. I personally have never suffered with that. I know some people are more prone to it, and the way to combat that is to pump more. I am absolutely not an expert on mastitis, so it is perhaps the sort of thing you should speak to a health professional about in terms of how often you should pump on that front, but certainly the way I have done it has worked for me. Again, I would say this varies depending on what stage you're at. The longer you pump for, probably the more milk you're going to end up getting, because your body thinks it needs to create more because the baby's hungrier. For me, I have got 2 pumps that I use. One is an electric one and one is a battery powered one. The battery powered one is less powerful, so I tend to do that for longer. So I use that one throughout the day because it's a wearable pump, which I will come on to shortly. And the electric one I use when my children are in bed, and I did use it during the night when I was expressing during the night. Because that one is more powerful, I was doing around 15 minutes on that, and the battery powered one, the maximum amount of time you can do in one session is 30 minutes. So I just always did 30 minutes on that one, and I found it gave me, with both pumps doing 15 and 30, I got about the same amount. So I would just recommend that the longer you pump for, the more milk you're going to end up having. I would say you've got to think about your situation on this front. So from my experience, the first time I did this journey with my daughter, I only managed to do 6 weeks because I had a double electric pump, which is a plug in the wall pump. You have 2 pumps which you hold over your breasts, and you're stuck in that spot basically, you can't move. You can change it so it's just one at a time, so you've got a hand spare. And actually I used to manage to like balance one on my leg, sort of with my knee, but that one was very restrictive. So for me, my daughter as a baby was very clingy, very bad colic. She did not like to be put down, so I really struggled to find the time to do that without her getting upset. And you are advised to wash sterilise and air dry before you use it again, which at the start I did that, but after a while I just used to put it in a bag in the fridge because the milk, whatever milk's still inside of it in the tubes or whatever, will stay cool. So a lot of people do that when they pump. That didn't work for me in the end. I just couldn't, it was making me really stressed out. So in the end I switched to formula after 6 weeks. With my son, he was a much more chilled baby, but now I've got a toddler running around, so I used my double electric pump with him for a month, and it wasn't that bad, but it would have been just nice to have a bit more freedom. So I then bought a wearable pump, which, if you don't know, it's battery powered. I got 2, so you can just pop them in your bra and you can walk around, do whatever you want with it basically. I have done videos on that if you're more interested, but that has worked obviously much better for me because I'm now 8 months in and I'm still doing it. It obviously does cost money, but you're saving money on formula, so it works, it sort of works out, and I'll sell it eventually. The only thing I would say, depending on which pump you want, make sure obviously you read reviews. There is always going to be bad reviews. On the pumps I've bought there has been bad reviews, but for me they have worked well. Look at YouTube reviews because I feel like that's the best way to get someone's opinion if they've used one. I have done a review on one of my pumps so far. I will be putting one up about my double electric one. I'll just say make sure you do research, do what you can afford, don't just dive into it without really thinking it through. I have never breastfed fully, so from my experience don't really know. From what I have heard from talking to people who do breastfeed, obviously it is much easier just to walk out of the house with your boobs because they're not going anywhere and you can just feed as you go. Whereas if you pump milk, you've got to get the milk, you've got to get something to heat the milk up with, you've got bottles to wash, you've got pumps to wash. For me personally, I think in the early stages, in the newborn stage where they are feeding so often, it was really nice for me to be able to just hand the baby to Lou and say, can you feed the baby? Because we've got milk, so we can both do it, and then I can go and sleep. In the first week or two, we used to take it in turns, sleeping in the day if we could, because obviously you're up a lot in the night. So one of us would go for sort of 6 hours and then we'd alternate, and that meant that I could rest after having the baby. He's obviously tired as well, so that's a nice part of it. I think as you get later on down the line, yes, it obviously is easier to breastfeed because you've not got anything to do, whereas we do have to wash bottles, sterilise bottles. I've got 2 pumps to wash and sterilise every day. It's not really like much more work, but obviously there is work involved. So I think if you want to be able to have the option to share the feeds and, leave the baby, go out if you want to, you can do that. Whereas with breastfeeding you are perhaps a bit more, you've got to be there all the time, which I just could never really get to grips with the breastfeeding. I also found it hard not knowing how much they were having. So with my son, I did actually manage to breastfeed using nipple shields, which, if you don't know, they're like little silicone teat type things that go over your nipple, and obviously then your nipple goes into the teat when they suck on it and they can get milk from you. It did work for me. I found it difficult because I thought it was quite fiddly because you have to make sure they're sterile, and I never knew how much he was having, so if he was then crying again like a lot after he's had a feed, I'm like, does he still want more? Is there something else? And I think because I knew so much with my daughter how much she was having, we got into a good routine. I think for me, I just found it easier knowing that side of it because it's what I already knew. Whereas I guess if you're already familiar with breastfeeding, obviously that's easier, or you get to know after a while. But certainly for me, pumping has worked, and we formula fed Emmy and that worked as well. So, pros and cons. Pumping should not hurt. Obviously sometimes your nipples get a bit sore, they get dry, you need to just get a really good nipple cream. So I use Lansinoh, which is great. So I just used to put it on after every time I pumped, and if they were sore after a couple of times doing it, they went okay again. That's the only pain I would say that you should feel. It's the same with breastfeeding, it shouldn't hurt. So if it does hurt, perhaps speak to somebody and maybe ask why, but it shouldn't really hurt. Sometimes it feels a bit like pulley, tiny bit sore when it's first turned on, but it lasts a couple of seconds and then it's normal again. So storage of milk, I personally keep a supply in the fridge and a supply in the freezer. So in the fridge I use 250ml bottles, They're called Feed, but you can get different brands, and it's literally just a long thin bottle, 250ml with a lid on. I have 5 of those which I bought off Amazon, so obviously that's quite a lot of milk you can keep in the fridge there. And then I bought some Lansinoh Breastmilk storage bags which go in the freezer, so they are sterile, so they've got a double like pinchy closure on it, and it's got a bit on the top that you rip off, which is make sure it's like fully closed when you buy them, so you know they're sterile. So they hold 6 ounces and you can just keep those in the freezer. They have a bit on it where you can write the date of when you pumped, so you know how long they've been in there for. So that allows you then to have a storage in the fridge and storage in the freezer. I would say the answers on this change depending on where you look, but I've always just gone off what my health visitor told me. So storing milk in the fridge, you can, as I already just said, I've got bottles, so you can store it in the fridge for 4 days. Sometimes at the earlier days when he was only having like 3 or 4 ounces and I had quite a big supply, I would like get a little sticker and write the date of when that milk went in the fridge and put it on the lid, so I could just keep an eye on how long it had been in there, because it's obviously very hard to get them all mixed up as to which one's which. And then I just washed off the label when I washed the bottles. So those, I do sterilise them as well, by the way. When I have finished, we wash them and sterilise them. And I never had any issues with them going anywhere close to 4 days. I think the most they're ever in the fridge for is 2 days maximum. So just if you want to monitor it, I would just label them. Again, this is the same as the last one. The answer does vary. I think it depends on what type of freezer you've got. So if you've got a fridge with a tiny compartment at the top with a freezer, I think you can put it in there less than an actual freezer. But yeah, my health visitor always said to me 6 months, so that's what I've gone off. Alfie has started to use that milk from the freezer, so he has had milk that is nearly 6 months old and he's been absolutely fine with it. I would just say to make sure that take them out of the freezer and keep them in the fridge to let them thaw out, which is what I do, so it does take a day or so sometimes. Make sure they are fully defrosted and give them a good, like, squish them all around a bit before you use them so it all mixes back up again. This, I've always been told, is 6 hours. I think that's pretty generic across the board. So if you're going out for the day and you need to take milk with you, 6 hours is quite decent for breast milk. I think that's great. So we've just got little like insulated milk pouches that are made for that, or in our changing bag we've got little ones as well in the front. So yeah, 6 hours. The only thing I would say, bear in mind that if you are having it out of the fridge, it obviously doesn't need as long to heat up because it's not cold. We've done that before, so we've warmed it up to the same amount of time we would at home. It's been too hot, so then you gotta wait for it to cool down, which is annoying when you've got a hungry baby, but yeah, 6 hours. So with this one, never put the milk in the microwave. There's a few things they tell you with this sort of thing, because if you put it in the microwave it can create air pockets which are extremely hot, so even if you've mixed it, it can burn your baby. So don't ever warm it up in the microwave. We have got a Tommy Tippy bottle warmer which you just fill up a little bit with milk. It's basically like a little mini kettle, I would say. So you put the bottle in it, it's got milk around the outside, turn it on the wall, and then you can just time how long it's been in there for. It does tell you like the amount of times depending on how many ounces you've got in the bottle. Or if you're on the go, you can get bottle warmers and things on the go. We literally just fill up one of those airtight flasks with boiled water, and it stays hot in there for a long time. And we just take a jug and just do that. Or if you're going to a restaurant or a cafe, ask them for boiling water and they'll heat it up. You know, there's various ways, but just never put it in the microwave. I have said this in other videos, it is very important to pump in the night at the start for sure. That is going to make your milk stay at the max level it can be at. They say that's the most important feed, the nighttime feed, between hours of 1 and 5 I think it is. I think it's something to do with your hormones. It's like you're meant to create the most amount of milk during those times, which I certainly do. I used to get sort of 8 ounces during the night times. And it does, if you will notice if you stop doing that your milk supply does drop slightly because it's drying up, because it's such a long time between it. So I would say it is important to do that for as long as you need to. So I don't do it anymore. I did stop when Alfie was about 3 months old because I had so much milk, because he was only having like 4 ounces at the time. But as soon as he started to go up again, like up the ounces, I had to start again. It is hard work, I won't lie, but now I have stopped. I feel great. I would say with this you will naturally increase your food and drink intake because you are using more calories, so you'll notice that you're more hungry and especially more thirsty. You will probably drink a lot more just naturally by feeling thirsty. So I've researched this because I have managed to lose a lot of weight from breastfeeding, so I am now like the lowest weight I've been in about 7 years. So you if you're fully pumping full time or breastfeeding, you use about 600 extra calories a day, which is the equivalent, they say, of walking about 7 miles a day. So great news. But obviously then you're using more calories, so you're probably going to be hungrier and thirstier. So I would just say, obviously yes, you're going to eat more, but just try and make sure you're eating well. Don't just eat crap. It's very hard not to sometimes when you're ravenous. I would just say, like, maybe have a supply of healthy snacks that you can just grab out the fridge. Various answers on this. I have been told yes and I have been told no. I've read a few times that you should limit your caffeine intake because it can submit through to the baby. So I don't really drink coffee. In fact, I don't drink coffee. I just have maybe 2 or 3 cups of tea a day, which I would say is fine because tea is low caffeine anyway. But that's the only thing I've always sort of stuck by. My health visitor told me that it's a bit of a myth when they say, like, if you eat certain foods your milk tastes like that. I've never noticed Alfie be put off my milk by what I've eaten. You know, I've had garlic, dairy, things like that. I know they say in the early days if you have too much like dairy or whatever, it can give them a bad tummy, or if you have too much gassy vegetables they can get gassy. Honestly, I don't know. I would just say make sure you eat healthy. They do also say the healthier, more balanced diet you have, the more milk you're going to get. And it's definitely true with the drink, I would say. The more you drink, I've noticed, the more milk I get. If I'm dehydrated, I definitely get less. So also alcohol is a big one. So I have had 2 alcoholic drinks in 8 months. 1 like here and there. They tend to say just wait hours until after you've drank it to pump. That's how I've done it. Like I say, 2 drinks in 8 months is not exactly bad. There's plenty of non-alcoholic options out there these days that I think are okay. So that is all the questions I can think of. If anybody has any more, please leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. I hope this has been helpful and I'll see you in the next video.